Mm-hmm. I want pretzels this morning for breakfast, so we're gonna make them, but they won't be ready until tomorrow morning for breakfast. We're gonna start out with, I guess I should clarify what I mean by pretzels. I don't mean those little crunchy things. I mean Laugen-Brezen, which are the big German pretzels. And when we were in Germany, we often had those for breakfast.
With all kinds of like jams.
Put some butter on there and some apricot jam that Oma made. That is just about as good as it gets. So, since we can't really buy that sort of pretzel here, as far as I've found, I know you can get them at, there's like something like it at Kaubamaya, but they like inject it with butter. Ugh. Anyway, the ones we made before, we've made these once before, and they were exceptional, I thought. So we're gonna make them again. They're relatively simple. The first thing is just, we're gonna make a pre-ferment, specifically Poolish, which just means that we're going to let the yeast kind of work and do its thing before we actually make the whole dough. So we're going to need 80 grams of flour, 2 grams of yeast, for fresh yeast, 2 grams of fresh yeast. Or if you don't have fresh yeast, then you can use a 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast. And 80 grams of room temperature water. So just put 80 grams of water. Oh wow, that was too much already. It's really not that much. Okay, there we have it. 80 grams of room temperature water. Then we need 2 grams of yeast, which, let's see here, unpack this. So, it's probably too much. It's 3 grams. Okay, this should be about 2 grams. Let's just crumble that into the water. And then, I always like the way the yeast makes my fingers feel, like nice and smooth. Almost like I just came from like the, I don't know what's that called, like manicure place or something. And then 80 grams of flour. It's equal parts water and flour. Yeah. And this is what's basically bread flour in America. In Europe, it's 550 is the code. We have a code for our flours. You could probably do it with just normal flour. I imagine it would turn out not quite as good. But I think it would still be good enough, I guess. Then we just mix this up. Once this is mixed up, then that's all we have to do for now. We have to let it sit on the counter for 8 hours, or not 8 hours, for 3 hours at room temperature, to kind of get the yeast going and making bubbles. Now we just let it sit for 3 hours at room temperature, and once it has set, oh also, like I made this in just a little like plastic container that has a lid that seals, or seals relatively well. That's important, so it doesn't dry out at all. And I'm just gonna let this sit on the counter for 3 hours. And then after 3 hours, I'm going to move it to the fridge for 8 hours. And then we'll go from there. So I'll see you in 11 hours. It may not seem like it to you, but it has been 8 hours. And our Poolish is looking...
But actually has been more than 8 hours, right?
Oh, that's right, because it sat outside on the counter for 3 hours. So it's been 11 hours, maybe a little bit more. And the Poolish can sit in the fridge for 24 hours. So we don't have to do this right now, but I want to eat pretzels in the morning. So I do have to do it now. So now we're going to make the dough. And we need, first of all, to melt a little bit of butter, 14 grams. And it doesn't need to be like hot, just barely melted. Just like this is fine. I've still got a couple little pieces not melted. We're going to put the Poolish in there first. And then the butter. And then we need 90 grams of water at 32 degrees Celsius, which I think I remember is 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, 90 grams of water. And then we just need to mix this up. It doesn't really mix up super easily, but it comes together. And we don't need any more yeast because we put all the yeast in the Poolish, and now that it's been fermenting for a while already, so we're going to have better flavor from the time it's spent fermenting. And we don't have to proof the entire dough for a long period of time. Now we need 245 grams of flour. And then 1 level teaspoon of salt. And that's fine, it doesn't have to be smooth yet. And actually we don't want to knead it much. The less we knead it, the easier it will be to roll out. So I'll just leave it like this, kind of shaggy. And we'll put a lid on that and let it sit for the next 30 minutes. It's now rested for 30 minutes. And I have like wet hands. I guess I should maybe try them off a little bit. You definitely want your hands still damp because it'll help you to not stick to the dough. And then we just need to kind of fold this over itself. You don't have to knead it very vigorously. I'm just kind of folding it in half a few times. We want to keep kneading really to a minimum. And what we're looking for is just a smooth dough, which this is pretty much there. And that's really all. So now it looks nice and smooth compared to earlier. And we just set it back in here and put the lid back on. And then it sits for another 2 hours. 2 to 2.5, right? Mm-hmm. No, wrong. 60 to 90 minutes. 1 to 1.5 hours, depending on how hot your house is. Since our house is pretty warm, I think around 25 degrees. Yeah, 60 minutes will do. It's been an hour, and the dough, as you can see, has approximately doubled, which is what we're after. It's much bigger than it was before. So, now we get to make the pretzels. First thing we need to do is just lightly flour that, and then lightly flour this right here.
This?
Yeah. Thank you. Then I'm just going to take my scraper and I'm just going to gently scrape dough out, just like that.
It has bubbles in it.
Well, it should have lots of air in it, twice as much as it did earlier, I guess. And then we just cut it up. So this recipe makes 6 pretzels. So I'm going to cut this into 6 pieces. So each of these will become 3. Just like so. And they don't have to be perfectly even, but the more even, the better, I guess. That's close enough. And then just need to take each of these little pieces and roll it up just like that, and then pinch it closed. You don't want to pinch these ends closed because then you'll trap air inside of it, and that's not good. There's no reason to do that. And then I'm just going to set them aside on this tray over here. I'm actually going to put the bowl back over the top of them in just a second. So get some flour.
You're gonna let them sit again, or?
No, when I make them, I just want to make sure that the ones that aren't being made don't dry out, because that makes it harder. And then just take the bowl and cover those for a second. And now we need to get rid of all this flour, because the next part we need the counter to be, basically we need the counter to stick. Just make sure there's no flour on here, because any flour that's left will make this much more difficult than it needs to be. And then comes the fun part. So we take out one of our little logs, I guess, and then we start to roll it. And the whole thing should be, I don't know, like 2 feet long, or what is that, like a little bit over half a meter.
Yeah.
Which is about like this. And then you just do that. Easy. No, so if you don't know how to flip the pretzel, then you basically just make it a U shape and cross these over, and then cross them over again to make a little spiral, and then fold these up on top of the, this guy's sticking, on top of here. Really, you just want to worry about where these are right now. Afterwards, you can kind of adjust where that knot is, just a little bit. Kind of something like that. is a nice pretzel. And then we put that onto the baking sheet over here. So, once again, now I can feel that there's a little bit of flour on this one, and it's not like rolling very well. It's kind of like sliding. And so I'm just gonna dab a little bit of water onto my hands, and that's gonna absorb that excess flour and help it stick to the counter. If you do want to know how to do the flipping thing, then you hold the ends in your fingers, and you want to make that same thing happen where it crosses over twice. So you just flip one end over the other, but you lift the whole thing up while you do it so it has time to kind of flip twice. Just like that. And then you lay these right over the top just like before. Kind of pinch that if you need to. And then you have your beautiful pretzel, just like that. So I guess maybe I should tell you why I know how to do that. Back when I was living in Utah, and I don't even know how old I was, probably no more than 12. My sister really wanted to do a Christkindlmarkt, which is a German Christmas market. And they're traditional all over Germany and really all over Europe. And she wanted to have one. And so my parents put in a lot of work, and she put in a lot of work. And they made a Christkindlmarkt happen. And so we wanted to have all of the traditional things for people to come and buy and experience. And one of them was pretzels. And so we learned how to make pretzels, and it's actually a totally different recipe than this. And I'm going to be honest, I think this recipe is actually much better, but don't tell Papa I said that. And so we made a lot of pretzels during that time. And so I learned how to flip the pretzels, just like that. And here they all are. Beautiful. So now we're going to cover them up with another baking sheet. My parents actually have these baking sheets that have like these snap-on plastic lids, which is really nice. If you have that, then use it. But we're just going to do this, and then we stick it in the fridge. And they can be in the fridge for 2 to 24 hours. So if, in this case, we're going to have them in overnight, and then tomorrow morning we'll bake them. But we've also done it where we just have it in the fridge for 2 hours, and then we bake them shortly after that. So we'll see you in the morning for the fun part, where we get to bake them and eat them.
So it's the next morning, and now we're gonna remove the cover from the pretzels. But we're still keeping them in the fridge for another half an hour.
Now we have to make the lye bath to dip the pretzels in. They are Laugen-Brezen after all, which means lye pretzel. And for that we need, I think, 720 grams? 720 grams of water and 30 grams of lye. So, cold water, that is 720 grams of cold water. And then, put my glasses on. Just gonna measure out 30 grams, if I'm not mistaken, 30 grams of lye.
And if you were to do it with baking soda?
I have no idea. It's a whole different process. This is what we're going to use to put the pretzels in and take them out. So I'll use that also to stir in the lye crystals. So this is our little setup. I have the pretzels here, which have been sitting uncovered in the fridge for about half an hour. That just helps form a skin on them, and it will make them smoother when they come out of the oven. Then we have a lye bath, and then we have another baking sheet, and that's where we're going to put them on to bake. And at this point, I've turned the oven on probably 10 minutes ago to 200, a little over 200 degrees. So for this part, I'm actually going to stick my hands in the lye bath, so I need rubber gloves. Here comes our first pretzel. You want to put the pretzel in face down, because that's the side that's going to be mostly in the lye. And then you keep it here for about 40 seconds, which I would like to have a clock that shows me the hands, but I don't have one of those in here right now, because the ticking annoys me all the other time when I don't need it. So now, pull this out, drip it off. We'll remove as much of the lye as possible. Some people will actually put it on a separate rack, but I find that to just be annoying. It takes too long. So now, our pretty pretzel, we stick it right over here, just like that. Then we do the next one. We're going to put this in the oven for about 12 to 15 minutes, depending on how brown they're getting. And then, right at the end, we're going to take a spray bottle and pull them out for a second, spray them with a spray bottle briefly, and then put them back in for 30 seconds. And that will help them be shinier.
And that's just water.
Yeah. Back in for a couple more seconds. So here we have our pretzels ready for breakfast. They are still warm, just like they're supposed to be. And my little brother was asking if they're crunchy when they come out of the oven.
Pretty crunchy.
So now you take a little bit of butter and you stick it on there just like that.
We might as well be in Bavaria.